Join me in learning Chitas for Tuesday, the third Torah reading in Parshas Vayishlach. Verse 31, chapter 32. Vayikra Yaakov Shem Amokim Peniel. Yaakov called that name of the place Peniel, Kira Isi Elikim, because I saw God, beheld I saw God, Panim el Panim, face to face, Vatinotz el Nafshi, and my life was spared. Verse 32, Vayizrach le Hashemesh, the sun rose upon him, Vayikasher overs Penuel, when he passed Penuel, v'hutzei le'al yereche, and he was limping on his dislocated hip. Vayizrach le Hashemesh, Rashi, Loshim b'nei Adam. What does it mean? Was the old sun only shining for Yaakov? Why does it say the sun was shining for him? What about everybody else? Loshim b'nei Adam, it's a terminology that people use. That we came to this place, it became light for us. And therefore, the Torah uses a simple a terminology that people speak in. This is the simple interpretation. The Medrash explains that God made that the sun should come out because of Yaakov. That's why it says the sun was shining because of him. It was a miracle to heal him from his dislocated joint. As it says in the book of Malachi, the sun comes out and brings healing to the world. Those few hours that the sun hurried lishkoya to set before its time, because of him, when he left Beersheba, if you recall, we said that the night became early because God wanted that he should sleep in Beersheba. Miara, in this case, it came out early, that it should shine because of him. This way he should have healing on his hip. What does it mean? And he was limping, meaning he was initially limping because of his dislocated hip. However, when the sun came out, that's when he was healed. Verse 33. Al came because of this, therefore. The Israelites do not eat from the nerve of the displaced of the hip, asher al kaf hayarech, which is in the hip joint, ad until today, because the angel touched Yaakov's hip joint, begid hanasha, in the nerve that was temporarily displaced. Verse 33. Verse 33. Rashi, Gid Hanasha, Lama Nikra Shmei Gid Hanasha. What does this mean? The nerve of the hip joint? Lafi Shenasha, because Yaakov was hit on his hip joint. Because of that, the nerve bounced out of its place. Mimkayim eva Allah, v'hu lashin kvitza, v'chein nasha gevurus asam, v'chein ki nashani alikim es kol amandi. The word nasha comes from the word removing, jumping, being out of its place. We find that Menashe calls his son, Yosef calls his son Menashe because he was yearning, he was desiring, he was very far, he was dislocated. Al kafa yarich, in French it's pulpa bilaz, meaning the joint of the hip. Kol basar gevaya, v'tolul v'ogul karikaf. Anytime you have meat, flesh, that is higher and is hanging like a round circle, it's called a spoon because it looks like the spoon, like Rashi explained before. Where it is explained in the laws of Nida, of what's considered the signs of what is a mature individual, talking about how it becomes the size of, when it becomes round, and it uses the terminology kaf, as a spoon. Verse 1, chapter 33. Vayisa Yaakov Yiseinu, when Yaakov raises his eyes, Vayaran, he sees V'hinei Esav ba'i v'imay Abram Esish, and he sees Esav is approaching, accompanied with him is 400 men. Vayachat es hayaladim, he divided up his children in two camps. Al Leah v'al Rachel, with Leah and Rachel, al shtei hashvachis, and with the two bondswomen. Verse 2. Vayasam es hashvachis es yaldein, and he placed the bondswomen and their children in front, Vesyaldei and Rishon and their children in front, Vesleah ve'Eladeh, and Leah and her children then, Achiranim behind them, Vesrachel Vesyosef Achiranim, and then Rachel and Yosef went behind them, Vesleah ve'Eladeh Achiranim, and Leah and her children behind them, because we know Achrein Chaviv, the last ones are the most cherished. So who were the last ones? Were Yosef and Rachel. Verse 3, for who ovar lifneim, and Yaakov went ahead of them, all the whole family, before the family approached. Vayishtachu arza, and he prostrated himself, sheva pa'amim, 7 times, ad gishte adochiv, as he approached his brother. Ovar lifneim, why did Yaakov go first? Why was he the one that approached them first? Yaakov put himself in front of everybody, and he said as follows, Omar, he said to himself, if that evil guy wants to make a war, let him start with me first and not touch my family. Verse 4, and Esav ran towards him. And he hugged him. And he embraced him. And he fell on his, threw himself on his neck. And he kissed him. And they wept. What does this mean here? Vayichabkeyu, and he hugged him, he embraced him. Nizgalgulu rachamav. At that point, even though yes, he maybe didn't remove his complete hatred for Yaakov, but at that point, he had mercy on his brother. When he saw his brother bow down to him 7 times, all those things, all the times he bowed, that brought him to a level of mercy for his brother. Now, if you look in the Torah, the word Vayishakeyu, and he kissed him, has dots on top of it, and in the Torah there are dots on top of it as well. Nakudalov, there are dots on them. And if there are dots on them, that means there's a hidden interpretation in here that has to be explored. And there's actually a dispute of opinions in the Braisa concerning what this means, in the Sifri. Yeshadarshu, some say Nikudazu, that the fact there are dots on here, it's actually an exclusion. It's coming to say that it's not the way it really seemed. Even though he kissed him, but he really didn't mean it, and he really didn't mean it at that time. And he really had no intent in kissing him. It was just on the outside. It was external, made as if he liked him. Yeshadarshu and Veloimer saying, Shaloi Noshke B'choliba, you'd not kiss him with his whole heart. Amar Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, meaning, if you want to know that because in the simple interpretation it means that he did not kiss him with all his heart. Why? Halachahi, it is a law. Biyadua, it is well known. She'esav seina liYaakov, Esav hates Yaakov, and he will forever hate him. Ella, what happened was, why is there a dot on it? Because that few moments, Nichmer Rachmav, all of a sudden his mercy, he melted away his hatred. At that point, he kissed him with all his heart. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was well known with the descendants of Esav, recognized and said, no, Esav really hates Yaakov. But what's the dots telling me? That even though technically he does hate him, but for that moment, he really did kiss him with his full heart. The Rebbe explained something fascinating here, that when we talk about writers, Rashi bring about these different opinions, whenever he brings these different opinions, and especially multiple opinions that have a relationship with one another, not only that, he mentions the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, using a terminology of halachahi, that it's a law. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as we mentioned, had to do with the ancestors of Esav, so you very well knew that Esav did not like Yaakov, and even when they made all the different streets in Rome, as he expressed himself then, was only to be able to, for themselves, but they still have this hatred towards Yaakov. But what was he saying? Halacha, the Esav Seina Yaakov, that don't be convinced and don't think you're going to flatter the enemy and they're going to all of a sudden like you. And therefore you're going to try to appease the government and do things which may not be in accordance with Jewish law. For saying you need to find ways to appease the government and thinking that they do like us. Remember, Esav Seina Yaakov, Esav hates Yaakov, and that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be until Mashiach comes. However, what does he say? There are times that we can get them to have mercy on the Jewish people. How is that? Not by giving and capitulating to them, but on the contrary, by learning from Yaakov, who Yaakov says, I was with Lavan, and I didn't compromise on one of those commandments. By standing tall and proud in who we are as Jews, we get even the Esavs to have mercy and to see the greatness of the Jewish people. Verse 5. Vayisa Einav, and Esav raised his eyes. Vayarin Sanoshim Vasayaladim, and he sees the women and the children. Vayomer, and he says, Mi Eilalach, who are all these? Vayomer, and Yaakov responded, Hayaladim, these are the children. Asher chonen elikim es avdecha, that God has been kind enough to grant to your servant. Rashi 5, mi elalach, mi ela liye shalach. Who are these? Who are these that they are, what your relationship, that you have all these people that they belong to you? This concludes the Torah reading for the third Torah reading of Parshas Vayishlach.